Do I think he's going to be possibly a good prospect in the NFL? Yes. But I just want us to hold off on our breaks here on this whole situation.
That's not what you're saying. You just said Trevor Lawrence is even a good prospect. See, this is why you're on here today, RKJ Man. You can't say stuff like that. That's crazy.
I never said that.
Yes, you did. You just said that.
I never said that. I said Trevor Lawrence, if he makes the mistakes that he makes, will struggle in the NFL.
Welcome, everybody, to the Cover 2 podcast. I am Nick Nenad.
And I'm Jared Smith.
And today we have a huge show for you guys today. I can't even emphasize how big this is. We have all 6 wild card playoff games to talk about today. We also have the national championship to talk about later. Jared, it's always one of the craziest football weekends of the year when you have Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and every single game matters. It's the weekend that our girlfriends always hate because we just sit there and watch the TV. And then also,
your girlfriend hates.
Yeah, of course, yes. And you got to talk to her about that too, which is funny. But also to promote later on in this show, we are going to have the one and only RKJ Man, Ryan Johnson, one of my co-hosts on my other podcast, The Ring Generals, come on to the podcast. Now, he's wanted to come on a couple times already, but he always didn't have enough takes or he didn't anger us enough to bring him on the podcast. Well, he did the unthinkable, and he angered Jared enough to where Jared wanted him on this podcast today. So the RKJ Man will be on here later, visiting via Skype with us. We'll do a little triangle action, and we will talk about not only the national championship game with RKJ Man, but we will also discuss Justin Fields versus Trevor Lawrence, because that is where our arguments clash, both Jared and I's and RKJ Man's. And if you can go back right now and look on Twitter if you want to see what happened and what caused this. But, Jared, we need to get into some just NFL news sort of before we get into the playoff talk. Last night, we were recording on Monday here. Last night it was the Washington football game versus Washington football team versus the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday Night Football, a matchup where Washington, if they won the NFC East. If they lost, the New York Giants would win the NFC East. Well, the game was going pretty solid. It was a pretty solid game, and then the fourth quarter came around, and Doug Peterson put the brakes on the game and brought in Nate Sudfeld, took out Jalen Hurts, and essentially lost the game on purpose. So we have to give our thoughts. It's something we didn't expect to talk about, but the integrity of the NFL is at stake here, and there are a lot of people mad at this. So, Jared, I'll let you start. This is your NFC East. Your Cowboys, unfortunately, were not able to beat the Giants, which I'm sure you're like indifferent about because you guys get a pretty good draft pick. But, the Giants, a lot of people are saying they got screwed here. A lot of people are saying that the backup should have came in and done his job. What do you think about this whole situation and about the integrity of the NFL today?
Yeah, I mean, in reality, the Giants, they did get screwed. Yes, like they were rooting for Philadelphia, and Philadelphia was in this game all the way up until the end. But my argument to the Giants is maybe you guys should have won more than 6 games, right? I mean, I don't know. It doesn't seem that hard, right? Just win 2 more games, and this Washington and Philadelphia game would have been irrelevant. And the Giants could have had this division, or the Cowboys for that matter, could have had this division wrapped up. In week 17, they could have sat their starters and gotten prepared for the playoffs. But because they were so crappy all year long, they then had to basically wait, and their fate was in the hands of another team, and it just so happened to be one of their rivals. So, yes, the Giants did get screwed, but at the end of the day, it's their own fault because they didn't take care of business in the regular season like they should have. And obviously, they lost their best player in Saquon Barkley. They've had other injuries, including the quarterback Daniel Jones, who's kind of been nicked up and in and out as well. So injuries along with COVID issues have, compiled and been some of the main sticking points as to why they've not had a great season. But I'm not going to sit here and feel sorry for the Giants, right? I mean, listen, do what you have to do, take care of what you have to do. Now, as far as the Eagles go, This is a situation where I think Doug Peterson was trying to get himself fired. I mean, it sounds so weird, but what other reason? Like, why would you take out Jalen Hurts, who's a rookie? It's not like Jalen Hurts is a veteran, been in the league 4 or 5 years, and you've got a lot of film on him and you know what he is. You are still trying to figure out the type of quarterback that he is and if he can be your franchise quarterback for the future, for the foreseeable future, because obviously the relationship with Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson is completely fractured, and that's coming from Carson Wentz's mouth himself. So, if I don't understand why you take out Jalen Hurts, he wasn't having a great game. He was 7 for 20 for 72 yards and an interception. Obviously, those are not great numbers. But you're going to tell me that Nate Sudfeld is better than Jalen Hurts or gives you the better chance to win this football game? I don't think so. His Doug Peterson's argument to the press was, well, Sudfeld had played really well in practice. He ran the scout team, and I just wanted to give him a look. Felt that he deserved to get a look. I'm sure there's plenty of guys in practice that play well, right? When you have plays that are scripted for you and you don't have to necessarily think, yeah, I'm sure we could go out there and throw the football and look pretty damn well, right?
Yeah, right?
So that to me is kind of a BS excuse, and I think he was lying to everyone, and obviously he's a bad liar because that was very detectable, at least to me. So and we even saw it on Jalen Hurts' face when he's sitting on the sideline, kind of just shaking his head. One of the coaches came up to him and he's just like, I don't know. You can kind of hear him saying, I don't know. Like, basically, I don't know why I'm not in the game right now and why I'm sitting on the bench. So if you're a Washington football fan, you're waking up this morning and you're happy because your team has won and they are now in the playoffs. If you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, you've got to be shaking your head, right? Because there's so many questions up in the air. Is Doug Peterson going to come back? Is Carson Wentz going to come back? You pay Carson Wentz $100 million. So that contract is not an easy one to get out of. And Jalen Hurts still only played in 5 games, 6 games. So is that enough film to go ahead and say, okay, this is our franchise? Or are you going into this draft that is quarterback heavy and potentially saying, we might need to draft another quarterback here? I mean, what do you think?
It's interesting to go to that question about Jalen Hurts. I think he absolutely proved he should get a chance next year to be the starting quarterback of the Eagles. I mean, he played better than Carson Wentz in the games that he played, and he was the full-time starter, or at least he played, close enough to Wentz to where you go, okay, well, this guy costs a lot less. He has the pedigree of being a great quarterback in college at a school like Alabama and a school like Oklahoma. And when he came in, it seemed like he got it and was ready to go. It wasn't like, for example, Nate Sudfeld, who came to the game Sunday and was not ready and was fumbling snaps and making me angry in the process watching bad football. But to get back to that really quickly, because I think Hurts should be the starter next year, I'm mad at the NFL this morning, or not this morning, this afternoon, Jared, because, when I look at this game, it's a travesty that what's kind of supposed to be the biggest game of the night, usually on Sundays, ended up being the biggest joke of a game in a lot of ways. And that is because the Eagles gave up. I mean, I was looking forward to watching the Washington have to try to fight for their lives at the end. The Eagles were playing pretty well. Hurts was playing well. I believe he had 2 touchdowns in this game early on. He was doing it himself. And I was like, this is going to be good. This is what the football week was supposed to end like this. And then, it ended up being that crap at the end. And there's just 2 things I look at coming from this game that anger me the most. And one of them is maybe you have to find these teams if you suspect that teams gave up or are tanking. You find some way to affect these teams. Maybe you take a draft pick away if you see teams tanking and doing stuff like taking quarterbacks out in the 4th quarter when they're winning. Because I think, Jared, if you and I can notice it and understand that that's what happened, I think the NFL could understand that too, right? And so maybe we have some punishment for these teams that give up at the end of the year and don't try because it hurts the integrity of the game. That's a lot tougher than this next thing I'm going to say. And the next thing I'm going to say is enough with the automatic bids for the division. We wouldn't have to deal with this crap if we'd had the NFC East just not in automatically. I mean, there's 3 teams that aren't making the playoffs that would have made the playoffs if this stuff wasn't going on. I believe it's 2 teams, 3 teams if the Giants would have been the team. With Washington, there's 2 teams that would have been ahead of them in the standings to make it if there was just a wild card race. So, we don't have to deal with this if those 2 things get fixed, and one of them is super easy. If you have to allow geography to affect the playoffs, then at least just do it like the NBA, where, hey, one of the teams from each division is making the playoffs, but they're not going to get a home game and they're not going to be the number 4 seed. They're going to have to play the Saints or the Seahawks or the Bills or the Steelers in the first round, right? Or you could just do, obviously, the inevitable and just kick them out of the playoffs, and whoever has the best record makes it. Because, Jared, we're going to talk about Tampa Bay and Washington in a second, and I probably know who you're going to pick to win because we've picked that team to win the entire year. So, again, the integrity of the game looks bad after Sunday in multiple ways. But let's get to the playoffs, because the integrity of football is at an all-time high when it's the playoffs in the NFL. Real quickly, once again, I'm promoting later on in the show, we will have national championship. We will have Ryan Johnson on the show. If you don't know who that is, he's my host on the Ring Generals, or one of the hosts on the Ring Generals, along with a couple other guys, Eric Santos and Jesse Chaparro. And he's very high energy. And the last time he was on the Cover 2 podcast, he literally made up facts about certain players on the Panthers. So we don't know what to. Yeah, we don't know what to expect. Hopefully, he's got his facts straight on the podcast, because that was his biggest gripe. He came with some good points last time, but just a couple of them were just plain lies. So hopefully, we have none of that. But let's get me and you, Jared, to the NFL playoffs. We're going to do this chronologically. Again, this is probably going to be a longer show, so you'll see the little time ticker down the middle of when each game is starting to be talked about. So if you want to skip, or you don't care about Colts Bills, you don't care about Washington and Tampa Bay, skip forward to whichever one you want, or skip forward to the national championship. All right, Colts Bills. That's the first game we're going to see Saturday. Jared, the Bills come in as the hottest team in the NFL right now, coming off putting a 50 burger on Miami. And blowing out every other team before that. And then you have the Indianapolis Colts struggle a little bit against the Jaguars, who are the worst team in the NFL on Sunday, but they have a good mix of a running attack. They have Philip Rivers, a veteran quarterback, and a solid defense. Jerry, I'll just give my take on this game first. When you look at this, you look at kind of, it's unfortunate that a good team like the Colts and a good guy like Philip Rivers has to run into an absolute buzzsaw in Buffalo on Saturday. Because
did you just call Philip Rivers a good guy?
He's a good guy. He's a very good guy. He doesn't cuss. He has like 19 kids. Maybe not the best guy to his wife, but in that way. But Philip Rivers is a good guy. He's a nice guy. And the nice guy has to face the best team in the NFL right now as we're speaking. And so, when I look at this game, the Bills are hot, right? They might be missing Cole Beasley. That would affect them for sure. But I think this team, they're loaded. They got a very good defense. They got a very good coaching staff. They have a very good quarterback in Josh Allen. And they have one of the best wide receivers in the game in Stephon Diggs. He's just balling out this year and already broke the Bills' record for stats. So when you look at the Bills, I don't really have to explain why they're good. They're just good. Looking at the Colts, a way they can win this game, it's, can Philip Rivers go above and beyond, right? Is Philip Rivers still going to be Philip Rivers, or is he somehow going to come out of the woodworks and win this game for the Colts? I'm not sure. What could help that is if Jonathan Taylor and this rushing game, which is the main cog here for the Colts, can get going and dominate this game, because I think that's very possible. The Bills' defense isn't the best defense. You can beat them, but I think if the Colts are able to take time off the clock, use Jonathan Taylor, use Naheem Hines, and open up the passing game for Rivers by doing that, I think they can score some points and keep up with the Bills. Unfortunately, they're going to be missing Anthony Costanzo, a big right tackle for a right or left tackle. I'm not exactly sure for the Colts. So one of Rivers' blind sides is going to be off this weekend. But I got the Bills in this game. I'm not going to go and say the hottest NFL team is going to lose this weekend. But I do see a way the Colts can win this game. Jared, do you see a way the Colts can win this game, or do you see the Bills just running over them?
No. This game's decided already. I'm glad that you gave that long soliloquy of points and everything, and that was great. I'm glad you did, because I'm not going to. Mine's going to be a lot more simplistic. You said it a couple of times, but I just want you to repeat it again. Nick, tell me, who is the Indianapolis Colts starting quarterback?
That would be a nice guy, Phillip Rivers.
Nice guy, Phillip Rivers. Philly Rib, as we like to call him around here. And what have I been saying? I've said it on the show multiple times. I've been saying it for years. What is Phillip Rivers? What does he do in the regular season? He's great, right? He puts up numbers, puts up stats, right? He talks a lot of trash. He's a great regular season quarterback. What happens the moment he steps on the field in a playoff situation? What does he do?
It turns not good. It turns not good.
Exactly. And he is facing, as you just pointed out, the hottest team going into the playoffs in the Buffalo Bills, in Buffalo, in cold weather. And you're telling me that Phillip Rivers and the Colts have a chance to beat the Buffalo Bills? I don't think so. This game is over. If the Colts score 14 points, they are lucky. Buffalo is going to run them over. Like, Josh Allen might be sitting in the fourth quarter being able to rest because this game might be over.
Wow.
Like, they have no chance. And I'm not saying this. I don't hate Phillip Rivers. Like, yeah, whatever. He's a good guy. He just does not perform in the playoffs. And his history as a 17-year NFL veteran proves that. It's not like he's only been to the playoffs once or twice and he's had bad games, right? Like Lamar Jackson, in a sense, for example. Phillip Rivers has been to the playoffs multiple times, albeit this is his first year with the Colts. So, new situation, new team, new scenario. I get that. But still the same Phillip Rivers. And he's basically the same thing all regular season. He had some games where he looked great, and he had some other games where he didn't look great. The inconsistency is what makes me not believe in Phillip Rivers. It's not necessarily the Colts, because I like the Colts defense. I love Jonathan Taylor as their running back. I think they have some nice young pieces at the receiving core. But to me, Phillip Rivers as the quarterback, as a, quote unquote leader, is not the guy that I would want under center going into a win or go home situation. So in the end, to me, this lines up perfectly for the Bills. This is almost just like, all right, guys, let's get a little. This is like one of those tune-up games, like when you're starting the season and it's like, oh, let's get like, and I don't want to be rude. I'm not trying to call the Colts Appalachian State, but it's like, your USC. It's like, hey, let's just get one of these small teams to come in. We'll kind of kick their ass, beat it by 30, 40 points, and then kind of get our team going. So this is what I think this game is for the Bills. I think this is like, all right, they rested some of their starters in week 17 because that game didn't mean anything. So let's get our starters back, get their rhythm back. And seriously, I'm being, in all honesty, by the fourth quarter, Josh Allen will be sitting and resting because this game will have been out of hand.
Well, Jared, you were right about Alabama and Notre Dame when you said the same thing last week. So you're on a hot streak right now. So maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. I'm just saying, this is the NFL. This isn't college. And I think that if they can get their running game going, if the defense can hold Stephon Diggs down and not allow him to beat them, and if Beasley ends up not playing, there's definitely a chance they can win the game. Yeah. And Phillip Rivers would have to play like a superstar quarterback. Problem with Phillip Rivers, though, he just has no mobility. Mobility at all. So it's like, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. But I'm telling you guys, if you're betting on this game, it is the NFL playoffs. You never know. It's the NFL. You never know. All right. So, Jared, let's move to this game, this next game on this Saturday. That's Rams at Seahawks. This is the 6th seed versus the 3rd seed. Jared, I'm crying because this could have been my Cardinals. This could have been my Cardinals this weekend.
Shoulda.
Unfortunately, Kyler got hurt, and we had no backup quarterback this weekend. So, can't blame anybody. But, Kyler got his leg crushed. Could have happened to any quarterback in the league. But, now we got the Rams and the Seahawks. And I think, Jared, the biggest thing about this game is if Goff's playing. If Goff's not playing, I think we both agree the Seahawks win this easy, right? We don't even have to say it. But let's do the prediction if Goff is playing, just to make sake for it. Because I think if Jared Goff is playing, the Rams have a chance. They're not out of it at all. I do think the Seahawks are the favorite team. But, Jared, why don't you start with this one? Let's say Goff is playing this weekend. how do you think the Rams can win this game over a Seahawks team that made them look really bad last time they played them?
Right. Listen, obviously they need Goff to play, and they have to play pretty damn close to perfect football on the offensive side. Defensively, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, we know what they can do, the type of pressure that they can create. I believe it was the first matchup with the Rams and Seahawks earlier this year, and the Rams just gave Russell Wilson fits. I believe going into that game, Russell Wilson hadn't thrown an interception, and he threw 2 or 3 in that game. So he the Rams defensively came up with a great scheme to kind of unravel Russell Wilson. So we'll see what they do this time around. But from an offensive standpoint, even if Goff does play, he's still not going to be 100% from that broken thumb. And it's his throwing hand, right? So Goff has thrown 13 interceptions this year already, and that's about middle of the pack when it comes to NFL, when it comes to starting quarterbacks. But I don't see Goff being able to, throw it deep or make those precision passes with a broken thumb. And especially seeing as, I feel like it'd be rushing him back a little bit. If this were still the regular season, I don't think there's any way that Goff is even playing this week. But obviously, because of the postseason win or go home, I'm sure that he's going to attempt to go out and try to play. But, how much spin is he really going to have on the football, right? How much grip is he going to have? What happens if he gets hit again, right? And not saying that the Seattle defenders are going to try to injure Goff, but it's just one of those things that when a player is injured in a certain spot, you're going to try to attack that injury, right? It's just, that's the way that football is. And so if you're a Seahawks defender, you're going to try to get your hands swatting on Jared Goff's hand, swatting at the football and trying to inflict pain in a sense. So I'm, not to say that the Rams backup is better than Jared Goff, but what's better? A backup at 100%? Or Jared Goff with a broken thumb, still recovering, and it's not like we're talking about Patrick Mahomes or Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers out here. Jared Goff has still been shaky during the regular season when he was fully healthy, and so for those reasons alone, if you can tell, I'm picking the Seahawks to win this game, even if Jared Goff does play, because I just don't trust that Goff is going to be able to spread the ball around to his receivers like he's going to need to. The Rams running backs are banged up right now. I believe it's Malcolm Brown that's the only healthy running back. Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, whether it's COVID-related issues or actual injuries, are both banged up. So it's not like the Rams can just completely rely on their three-headed trio at the running back spot. It's going to have to be Jared Goff throwing the football. And we all know that when Jared Goff doesn't have that running game to lean on, and he has to sit back and pass and be that, elite passer, bad things tend to happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jared, the first thing I wrote down under if Goff plays, he needs to not turn the ball over, because in that Seahawks game, the last game that he's played up until this game, he turned the ball over before he hurt his thumb. It wasn't because of his thumb. He was turning the ball over already. Right. So I'm not cutting him any slack there. I think also in this game, McVay needs to use his full playbook. Obviously with John Wolford in the game against the Cardinals, it was a very, very limited playbook. He needs to create every little trick play, motion play you possibly can to help out Goff. We've been hearing for years, Jared, that Sean McVay is telling Goff the plays up until about 15 seconds on the play clock, like the limit you can legally in the NFL. I would expect. Oh yeah. I would expect a lot of that this weekend because Goff is compromised a bit on his thumb. And so, it's not his fault that he hit his thumb against the defender's helmet, but nonetheless, that's what he's dealing with. And so Goff already was turning the ball over, make it as easy as possible on Goff. I will say this, Cam Akers did play against us, the Cardinals, this Sunday. He just wasn't much of a factor because the Cardinals were keying on the run. They wanted that quarterback to beat them. So they will have Cam Akers most likely and Malcolm Brown, which is solid, but not the best. It's not Todd Gurley. I'll say that. And so, the Rams are in for a tough, the defense again, Jared, you mentioned the defense. You got Aaron Donald. You got one of the top defenses in the NFL. That is definitely going to help you. And that defense needs to ball out because the offense might not be able to score that much. And so, the Rams defense really needs to step up. Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, They need to step up. For the Seahawks, I said stop the run and force Goff to make big plays. It makes sense because I don't even know if Goff can make big plays. Long drives or quick scores, keep their bad defense off the field, because if the Rams are flowing, the Seahawks defense is not good. It might not be the worst in the league at this point, like it was earlier with additions like Carlos Dunlap and others, but it's still not very good. So they need to keep that defense off the field and maintain the ball and avoid Aaron Donald at all costs, because double team him, triple team him, whatever you have to do. If Aaron Donald is getting to Russell Wilson, you guys are screwed in the Seahawks. But I am going to go with the Seahawks. I think they do enough to win this game. And we'll be talking about whatever their next matchup is will be a little bit more interesting without likely an injured quarterback. All right, let's move on.
I'll say this too, really quick before we move on. The one player on Seattle that's probably not happy to play the Rams is DK Metcalf. Right?
Absolutely.
In the 2 games this year, the DK Metcalf has gone up against the Rams, and specifically when Jalen Ramsey guards him, in both games. In the first game, Jalen Ramsey blanked DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf didn't have a catch. And I believe in the second game, he only had 2 or 3 catches. Like, basically a non-factor. And we know how big, how athletic, and how good of a football player DK Metcalf is, right? We've seen what he can do to other DBs. But Jalen Ramsey has his number. So if you're the Rams, I'm basically going up to Jalen Ramsey and saying, all right, man, you're following DK Metcalf wherever he goes. That's it. I don't care if he's playing in the slot, outside, like tight end, whatever it is. Jalen Ramsey is on DK Metcalf, and Russell Wilson, you're going to have to find another receiver to throw to. So, yeah, DK Metcalf, he's going to have his hands full this week, and I'm sure he's going to be motivated, and he's going to want to come out and prove that, those 2 games in the regular season were flukes. But so far, Jalen Ramsey has won that matchup, and I think that's something that will, give the Rams an upper hand.
Yeah, no, Jared, it's a great matchup to watch. And again, this Rams team has a chance in this game for sure, and they've obviously beat the Seahawks already this season. So we're not sitting here and saying they can't win. It's just going to be tough with the injuries that they have and the Seahawks, the way they've been playing lately as well. All right, Jared, let's move to the last game on Saturday. It's the Buccaneers versus the Washington football team. This was the game I mentioned earlier that we both kind of, we were looking at, whoever the 5th seed is likely going to have a win. And now that it's the Buccaneers who have put opponents
last 2.
It looks even worse. And so, great story in Washington making the playoffs this year. And I thought they were the best team in the NFC East. I think they would have came back and won that game against the Eagles. No matter all the what ended up happening at the end with Fields or not Fields, Sudfeld and Hurts. I think they would have won that game and they would have been the NFC East champ. So this is the rightful team in here. And like you just mentioned, Jared, their defense is very good. Like, they have one of the best, if not the best, defensive line in football, led by Chase Young. They got Montez Sweat, a guy that kind of got a steal in the draft on the other side of the line, and a couple other guys. And overall, their defense is pretty good. The offense has some good pieces. They got Antonio Gibson, breakout year running back. Terry McLaurin, very good year at wide receiver. And now Alex Smith as the quarterback with that valuable veteran leadership, along with head coach Ron Rivera. This team is solid. But they're playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have Bruce Arians, who has a lot of history with quarterbacks and in the playoffs. They have Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin and maybe Mike Evans. We'll see about that. They have a 2-headed running back duo in Ronald Jones Jr. from USC and Leonard Fournette. And then Jared, there's forgetting his name. There's this quarterback they have that he has a lot of playoff experience, right? Who's the quarterback for the Buccaneers?
Just some dude named Tom Brady,
Yeah.
6 Super Bowl
Tom
champions.
Brady.
No big deal.
Yeah.
No big deal.
That's right. Yeah, it's Tom Brady. So you can see how it's a mismatch here. The Buccaneers will have to deal with the Washington defense. There will be some sacks in this game. There will be some good defensive plays. I don't think the Buccaneers blow them out, but there is just a different talent gap on these two teams, and you see it in the record as well. The Washington being a 7-9 team, that could have been a lot worse if they weren't playing in the NFC East. So this is a big mismatch. I'm going with Buccaneers. I'll give the Buccaneers a 10-point win. It will be a better game than we expect, but I cannot say Washington's going to win this game.
No, I can't either. And you're right. Washington hangs their hat on defense. Alex Smith, no one likes to be called a game manager, but that's really what he is. He's not a guy that's going to stretch the field and throw a lot of deep passes. He's more of the short to intermediate throwing game, kind of run the football and that type of thing, and then let your defense really win it for you. So, but when you're going up against Tampa Bay, and like you mentioned, the last two games, they've scored over 40 points. Like, Washington's going to have to bring their offensive game. They're going to have to put up points because if you have too many 3-and-outs and field goals are not going to win this game, right? If with Riverboat Ron, as we know, is one of the, he definitely likes to gamble and take chances and go for it on fourth down, that type of thing. I don't think we're going to see a lot of field goals. I don't think we're going to see a lot of punts. Depending on the scenario and the situation, I think we will see, potential fourth down scenarios where they say, leave the punting team, on the sidelines. We're going for it because you have to be able to come away with points and mainly touchdowns if you want to beat the Buccaneers because they have kind of hit their stride. I would say that next to the Bills, who we already talked about, the Bucs are probably one of the hottest teams coming into the playoffs, right? Tom Brady and this offense finally seems to have gelled. You've got Rob Gronkowski actually looking like Rob Gronkowski. Yeah. And, the big question mark will be Mike Evans. Here's a question to you, and before I kind of continue with this analysis, should the Mike Evans and those starters been in that game yesterday? Fortunately, Mike Evans doesn't have any structural damage to his knee, or at least so far that's the report. But it's why were they even? Because the injury did it happen in the second half?
I believe the Mike Evans injury happened right in the beginning of the game. So the Buccaneers, the Buccaneers, if they would have lost and the Rams would have won. If the Buccaneers would have lost and the Rams won like they did, the Rams would have been the 5th seed. That's why they had to try. That was at stake. Yeah. And the 5th seed, obviously, that 5th seed, that's a big deal this year. So there was an absolute reason why the starters should have been playing. Mike Evans did get hurt early in this game, so there was really nothing you could have done. And it was just him running over the middle. Nobody touched him or anything either. So it was kind of one of those.
Yeah, those are the worst ones.
Yeah. There's nothing.
Those are usually the worst ones, the non-contact.
Yeah, there's nothing the Buccaneers could have really done about that. Now, Jerry, I want to bring this up too. I'll say this: if the Buccaneers, there's two things that could lose them this game. One, being undisciplined, because they were one of the most undisciplined teams in the NFL, especially early on. Bad penalties, key penalties can lose you a football game. My Cardinals being numero uno in the league in penalties.
Congratulations.
I'm affected by
proud about that.
Sure. But the Buccaneers were up there too, and especially early on in the season, they were number one as well. So if that comes back to bite them, absolutely Washington can win a game. Making key plays and getting key penalties to move down drives. And then the other thing, the more realistic thing, is if the Buccaneers go away from the run immediately, if for some reason Washington takes the early lead. We remember the Saints game where they got blown out in Sunday Night Football. They ran the ball 4 or 5 times, and that's not Brady's game. Brady's game is play action, quick passes. So I think if the Buccaneers end up, going away from the run or being undisciplined, absolutely they could be in trouble in this game. But I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm still going to go with the Buccaneers.
Yeah, no, I think they found their groove right now, and listen, 2 weeks ago, they were playing the Lions, who obviously we know how bad of a football team they are. They fired their head coach, blah, 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 all that. And then they went up against the Falcons yesterday. So obviously not, and I guess, and even 3 weeks ago, they played the Falcons again. So their last 3 weeks have kind of been cupcake games. And listen, if you're the Bucs, you'll take it because that's just momentum that they have been able to build going into the playoffs. So, you can't fault them for playing their schedule. That's just the way things fell. But I think they're hitting this right. And Antonio Brown, like you mentioned, he seems to finally kind of gotten his legs underneath him, right? Coming in late in the season, I believe, was it the 8th game or the 9th game of the season that he was able to finally play because he was suspended for basically the first half of the entire year. So it's not like Antonio Brown came in. It's not like he came in and he was just, I'm sure he was training, but he probably wasn't in actual football shape. It's not like he was wearing a helmet and shoulder pads, in training camp and had been with the team. He had to learn a new system first before he could even step foot on the field. So I think we are finally seeing Antonio Brown kind of like in mid-season form right now. And listen, if Mike Evans is able to go, you got Mike Evans on the outside, Antonio Brown, obviously you got Gronk, Chris Godwin, right? If I'm the Washington secondary right now, I'm not getting much sleep because you're going to have to go up against those three and then Gronk as well. That's not a good recipe. So, and I don't think, off the top of my head, I can't really name any Washington defenders right now or anyone in their secondary that's at least worth mentioning. So no offense, but they don't have anyone, in my opinion, of the caliber that can just one-on-one stop any of these Bucs receivers. So not a good matchup.
No, this is a mismatch for sure. And we expect the Buccaneers to win. All right, moving to Sunday, Jared. This first game on Sunday is the playoff game of the week for sure. We got the Baltimore Ravens, who are rolling right now. They're doing the same thing as a lot of these other teams. Lamar Jackson again. That team is just plowing over everybody. And then you have the Titans, who has a guy that plows over everybody, and Derrick Henry. He went over 2,000 yards yesterday.
Yeah, only the 8th player ever to do that.
Yeah, and if that game goes to OT, he might have a chance at getting close to Dickerson's record, to be honest. And unfortunately, the Titans had to throw that long bomb at the end of that game and ruin it. But so this is a matchup of running games. This will be the quickest game of the playoffs as well, most likely, because all the Ravens do is either run Lamar or Gus or J.K. Dobbins, and all the Titans do is run Derrick Henry. It's going to be a really quick game. It's going to be like we're watching a game from the 70s. Like I mentioned, Jared, I'll do my analysis first on this one. The Ravens are rolling. They're the hotter team coming in. I think Lamar Jackson is at his peak right now. But there's one thing we look at when the playoffs come around and Lamar Jackson, it happened last year against the same team. It's his passing ability. And I think that's the one thing that needs to stick here. And I'm going to keep saying it every single year until Lamar Jackson wins the Super Bowl, essentially. And that is, can he pass the ball in the big moments? Because he hasn't so far in his career. And like I said, the last couple games, when he's been throwing the ball, it's been against really, really bad teams. So I don't know where to look. And, I don't know if it's returned. Early on in the year, guys were stopping him. They were keying on him running the ball, and they were making him pass, and they were losing games. And it's one of the reasons why the Ravens almost didn't make the playoffs this year is because of Lamar Jackson. Now they figured that out, and again, maybe beating up on bad teams helps you coming in. But Lamar Jackson is the key to the Ravens, and really the only key. If they don't have Lamar Jackson playing well in this game, I think the Titans win. Now, the guys that need to step up are Ryan Tannehill. He needs to make some big plays, not be average in this game. Jared, we saw on Sunday Night Football, that snow game, the Packers were 6 in the box. I wanted to ask you this. What do you think the Titans have to do to stop Lamar? Do you think we could see a strategy in this game? Do you think we could see not Lamar, the Titans defense, the Ravens defense against the Titans, like we saw against the Packers? Do you think we see a 6 in the box, 7 in the box, just to stop Derrick Henry at all costs?
Oh, you have to. You put 8 in the box, right?
Even
You're
that
playing
because Tannehill's having a good year.
He is having a good year, but I wouldn't say that he is Patrick Mahomes. I wouldn't say that he is Aaron Rodgers. And while A.J. Brown and Corey Davis have been, reliable, good receivers for the Titans, I would make the argument that the Baltimore Ravens secondary is equipped to be able to handle receivers one-on-one when you're looking at Marlon Humphrey, who is the, I believe, second highest paid corner in the league. You got Marcus Peters, Jimmy Smith, right? So those 3 guys, all top picks at one point or another when they came into the NFL. I think they are all, maybe not the Jalen Ramsey type of lockdown corner, but they are all up to the task of being able to play man coverage and basically try to lock down a receiver one-on-one. So if I am Baltimore, you have to stack the box and rely on your well-paid secondary to say, all right, guys, this is the game where I need you guys to be Deion Sanders, basically take half the field away, and we've got to stop Derrick Henry, aka Mr. Tractorcito, right? He, literally, as the season goes on, he just gets stronger and stronger and stronger when guys are typically wearing down, right? So obviously, 17 weeks going into the playoffs, Ravens don't have a bye. They kind of did have a bye because they just played the Bengals, and might I add, the Ravens rushing attempts. They ran for 400 yards on the Bengals last week, right? So you want another recipe for how to keep the Titans offense and mainly Derrick Henry, from going off. You keep on the sideline. And if you're Baltimore's offense, you literally run, hopefully just like you did against the Bengals. Now, the Titans have a better defense than the Bengals. I'm just saying, talk about another team that, at least from a running standpoint, seems to be gelling. That would be the Baltimore running attack. So, but like I said, if you're the Baltimore secondary, you're going to say, all right, guys, you're matching up one-on-one. Marcus Peters, you got Corey Davis, Marlon Humphrey, you got A.J. Brown. We're putting everyone else in the box. And there's going to be at least one safety in the box at all times, in my opinion. I mean, like, realistically, are you scared of Ryan Tannehill, like, beating you for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns?
No, absolutely not.
If I'm going to lose, it's going to be because Ryan Tannehill has a great game. I'm not going to lose because Derrick Henry rushes for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, you can't lose that way. When you have a great player like that, I don't care what sport it is, you have to shut that one superstar down and basically say, make the rest of the team beat us. Like, you can live with the rest of the team, the rest of your opponent playing well and losing like that, but you can't live with a superstar beating you. Like, we all know Derrick Henry's a superstar. There's no, like, any other way to put it. He is a legitimate, bona fide box office superstar. You have to stop this guy. That is, you cut the snake, or you cut the head off a snake, and you got an opportunity to win. And Derrick Henry.
The difference with Lamar Jackson is he can run and pass. So he has the ability to, beat you passing. That's what makes this game so interesting, though, is that, Lamar isn't that great of a passer. He's gotten a little bit better, but we still don't know, because earlier this season, they were losing to the good teams because they were stopping Lamar. And that's why this game is so interesting and it's so hard to pick, because I feel like I want to pick the Ravens because they've been so hot. But then I remember what happened last year, and I remember Lamar's passing ability, and I remember it's the playoffs, and I go, oh, maybe if they stop Lamar, the game, ends up being the same. And then for the Titans, you go, oh, well, what if they stop Derrick Henry? Is Tannehill really going to win a game against the Ravens and Lamar Jackson? But it's very, very interesting. Jared, do you have a pick on who wins this game? I think this is the first game where we're kind of undecided.
I am, and I keep going back to last year, right? Let's remember, this is a matchup from last year's playoffs in the divisional round where Tennessee went into Baltimore. And let's remember, that was obviously a long time ago when there was fans in the stands and there was a legitimate home field advantage. And Tennessee came in and almost shocked the world, right? That was the divisional round matchup. Tennessee went on to play New England, if I'm not mistaken. So I think Tennessee is probably feeling good about themselves, right? Because they feel like they have a recipe for success, and they have already beat the Ravens in the playoffs. So obviously, I understand it's a whole new year. There's players from both teams, that are now here that weren't there a year ago. But if I'm Baltimore, now having to go into Tennessee as an away game in a wild card, I'm just looking off of last year, I'm not that confident. I'm confident in what my team has done leading up to this point and getting on a hot streak coming into the playoffs. But as far as matching up one-on-one with Tennessee seems like they've got the recipe to win. So I think I've got to go with Tennessee, right? Because they're at home and because they've shown that they can beat Baltimore. But, this is going to come down to a field goal game, right? Whether it's Justin Tucker or I'm not sure who's actually kicking for Tennessee, because I know that Tennessee's starting kicker is out right now. But I think this comes down to a field goal at the end. You're right. This may be one of the quickest games of the entire weekend, but it will definitely be a close game. There will be no blowout. It will be an evenly matched game. But I guess if you're forcing me to pick, I'm taking Tennessee right now.
Okay, so we're going to disagree. Jerry, I'm going to go with the Ravens. I think Tennessee's a little bit worse of a team this year. I just think the Ravens are hot right now. Lamar's feeling it. They're not 15-1 or whatever they were last year. They've kind of been in the playoffs for 3 weeks straight. The Titans have as well, but it just feels a little different. I just feel like the Ravens defense, like you mentioned, those corners are going to be able to stop A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. Even if they are able to stop Derrick Henry, the defense is not going to be, hindered that much. So I'm going to go with the Ravens. I think the Ravens actually win by 2 possessions in this game as well. I think they're going to be able to stop Derrick Henry. This is going to be a 10, 13, 14-point win for the Ravens. I think they're going to shock a lot of people and really, set us up for some really good playoff games along down the road. With maybe the Bills or the Chiefs or somebody like that. It's going to be really exciting with the Ravens in the playoffs. I always say this. I go back to what my head coach said in high school baseball. He always said, it doesn't matter what your record is. It matters who's the hottest going into the playoffs. And
that's
so
true.
we were a team that upset a few people going into the playoffs, even though we weren't the most talented. And it's because we won a bunch of games at the end of the season and won some big games at the end of the season. So, I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with the hotter team. I'm going to go with the Ravens. They look better anyways. So I'm going to go with the Ravens. This is the one game we disagree.
I'll say this too.
So far.
I think if you're Lamar Jackson, you're coming to this game and you've got a lot of butterflies. You're nervous because so far in Lamar Jackson's short, but obviously, very successful career, winning MVP, all that stuff, he hasn't played well in the playoffs. Go back to 2 years ago at home when he lost to the Chargers and Philly Rib. And then last year, obviously losing to Tennessee. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Lamar Jackson himself to come out and perform well, seeing as in the regular season he's done great and he was the NFL MVP last year. But he hasn't really done well in the playoffs so far. And so I think this is a big game for him and not only his team, but for him, individually to show that as a quarterback, I can win in the big games because so far he hasn't been able to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I get it. I'm saying I'm going to always go to Lamar's passing ability until he wins the Super Bowl because that would mean they won the Super Bowl because you can't stop Lamar Jackson ever if he can run the ball. Like, seriously, you would not be able to stop him. So we'll see. But yeah, Jared, that's the first game we disagree on. He's got the Titans. I got the Ravens. All right, moving on. Second to last game of the weekend. It's the Chicago Bears at the New Orleans Saints. Interesting matchup here. Not what a lot of people expected, like when the season started, to have the Saints and Chicago in a playoff game this year. But we have this. We have obviously a great defense in Chicago going up against a potentially great offense in the Saints. Now, Jared, here's the big thing for the Saints, because Chicago's coming in, relatively healthy to this game. Will the Saints have Michael Thomas back? Will Kamara be able to clear COVID protocol?
Right.
I think they'll have all the other running backs back. But, if the Saints are missing Michael Thomas and Kamara, one or the other, changes this game a lot. So I think Chicago, they're going to have to prepare for all of it, and they might benefit from having these guys out. What's your hunch on this game with all these different factors heading into this?
No doubt. Listen, COVID has definitely affected the Saints, and hopefully Drew Brees is a little more healthy. Those 11 cracked ribs are getting more and more to full strength. Who knows if he's still at full strength right now or if he's still recovering? But you're right. Michael Thomas, is he going to play? He was put on IR, and so he did have to miss at least 3 weeks. I forget exactly when he was put on IR, but there's a specific time limit to where if he's only 2 weeks into that, he ain't playing, right? Because you have to be on IR for a minimum of 3 weeks. So, and then Alvin Kamara as well. But I mean, can you imagine Drew Brees not having Kamara, not having Michael Thomas, having to rely on Emmanuel Sanders, potentially Latavius Murray, and Taysom Hill? I mean, Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas at their respective positions are arguably the best, right? Yeah. Against a very good Bears defense. You know what I mean? So I don't know, man. The thing is, though, here's what's going to come down to, right? I like the Bears defense and I like how they play. Do we trust Mitchell Trubisky to win the game, right? Like, because we know that Drew Brees can go and march a team down the field and score points and like win you a game in crunch time. Do we trust that Mitchell Trubisky in a playoff game on the road, albeit no fans, or maybe if there's 5,000 fans, something like that? Do we trust that Mitchell Trubisky is going to be able to lead this Bears team, right? Because they've been able to run the ball effectively. But if you get into a late game scenario where you have to throw it and the defense knows you have to throw it, ain't no way I'm trusting Mitchell Trubisky, right?
No, you can't. You can't trust Mitch. And here's the reason you can't trust Mitch is because all the games Mitch has won this season have been against bad teams, and he's lost twice to the Packers pretty bad. And obviously the Packers are top 3 team in the NFL right now, but he hasn't looked good really at all in these games. He's looked better than some other quarterbacks, but is it going to be the Mitch that beats the Jaguars, or the Mitch that beats all these other random teams like the Vikings and the Texans and the Falcons? Or is it going to be the Mitch that gets blown out by the Packers every game? Because the Saints are more like the Packers than the Jaguars or Falcons or Giants. So, the Saints, again, if they're missing Thomas and Kamara, it helps. And that defense for Chicago definitely can stop and injure Drew Brees without Thomas and Kamara. But if those two guys are in the game, it is really all on Mitch, and it's going to be tough. And the Saints can just focus on David Montgomery, who is a very good running back. He's the one of the best tackle breakers in the game. So you have to hit him low and you have to tackle right against him, so he can beat you. But again, it comes down to those big plays with Mitch. It reminds me a lot of Jared Goff, because we think that the scheme works. We think that a lot of the other pieces work. But if that quarterback piece doesn't work in the playoffs, you can't win. And so I'm gonna pick the Saints in this game. I'll give some ways Chicago can win this game, though. If Chicago can stop the running game, whether Kamara or is playing or not, they have a chance. Because I think forcing Brees to throw is actually a little different than a lot of the other years. We've seen he has the broken ribs. We've seen his arm isn't the same. So that you want Brees to have to be making these big plays because he's not the same. And against this defense, if they're rushing him and they're stopping the running game and he's getting sacked and hit hard, I think the Bears definitely have a chance to make Brees look really bad in this game. And then I said feed Montgomery. Make Montgomery beat the Saints. It will also lead to more open options in the passing game for Mitch. Make it easier on Mitch. It's not like the Rams where they don't really have a star running back. David Montgomery is a star. So I think if you can feed Montgomery and you can also stop the Saints running game, you have a chance. And if you're the Saints, Drew Brees needs to play the game like it's his last, because it might be legitimate.
Oh, he's definitely retiring. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
He's he's done.
He needs to play this game balls to the wall, because if he has Thomas, cool. If he has Kamara, cool. But he's still messed up, and one hit from Khalil Mack could throw him into a blender. So we'll see what happens. It'd be interesting to see if Taysom Hill comes into this game as well. What difference it would make as well, and if they use Taysom Hill a little more than they do the regular season.
They will. And the last thing on the Bears, right? And this is actually kind of astonishing. The Bears are the first team, I believe, in NFL history to, at some point in the regular season, have a 6-game losing streak and yet still make the playoffs. Like, how does a team make the playoffs and you had a 6-game losing streak at some point in the regular season, right? Like, you have a 6-game losing streak and you are done. They've had such a roller coaster of a season. They started the season 5-1, right? They started the season 5-1, and then they went on a 6-game losing streak, and then they won 3 games in a row, and they just lost their last game to the Packers. So it's like literally up and down all year long. And then you throw in the fact that Mitchell Trubisky's been injured. Nick Foles had to come in at some point. Now Mitch is back under center. It's like, what Bears team are we going to get? Are we going to get a great defensive performance, a good running game from David Montgomery, and the kind of game manager Mitchell Trubisky? Or are the Bears going to get down by double-digit points and Mitchell's going to have to throw the ball, and that's not going to be good for the Bears?
No, it's not. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, we got, like a lot of these other quarterbacks, they got to prove it to us before we start giving them credit. Speaking of quarterbacks, they need to prove it to us. Let's move to our last game. It is a rematch from Week 17. It is the Browns. It is the Steelers. It's the first time the Browns are in the playoffs since like 1919 or something like that. It's been a long time since they were in the playoffs. You have the Steelers, who have had a really weird year. There's 11-0 at one point, speaking of winning and losing streaks, and they have not looked good since then. And so this is a very interesting game. You can't really judge the last game because it was Mason Rudolph versus the Browns, and Big Ben was out. And
the Steelers still almost won.
Oh, I know, and that's why we're going to talk about the game. We got to talk about the game. There's a couple of these games this year where the Browns have looked terrible, and there's a couple of these games this year where the Browns have looked great. There's a couple of these games this year where the Steelers have looked great, and there's a couple of these games where the Steelers have looked terrible. So really, what team is going to show up this Sunday? I am super interested. I'll give my analysis on this first. The Browns are one-dimensional. They're a running team. So if you can get Chubb and Hunt to run like they have all season, you absolutely have a chance to win this game. Your defense also needs to, pressure Big Ben and not allow him to win the game against you. And that's fairly easy because the Steelers, we now know, have no running game. Zero. One of the worst running games I've ever seen in football. And they'll just give up on it. They'll just say, you know what, we're playing, Benny Snell's going to get 12 carries. We're going to run the ball 8 times during the game, or Big Ben's going to throw it 60 times. So you can stop the Steelers' offense by just stopping the receivers. Now, that's challenging because they have 3 stud receivers in Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith, Schuster, and Claypool. So, defense has its work cut out for them. 2 other things I need the Browns to do to win this game. Landry needs to play like a true number 1 receiver. He needs to be out there like DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, all these other guys. That's what I'm saying. He needs to play like it. He needs to play like a number 1 wide receiver. He needs to play like Odell Beckham Jr., for example. So, and then for that, I say all these things because Baker Mayfield needs help. He needs some help to win this game. I don't trust Baker Mayfield. I know he's had a good year. I know he wants to prove Colin Cowherd wrong, right? But that stuff doesn't matter, right? What matters is these playoff games. And what I've seen from Baker is him have some great games and him have some really bad games. I personally think Baker takes too long to throw the ball. So by these running backs opening holes for him and Landry getting open for him, it helps. But I think this all lies on Baker Mayfield for the Browns if they want to win. For the Steelers, you have one of the best defenses in the NFL. Use it to your advantage. Force Baker to make those big plays and throw the ball, and don't let Chubb and Hunt beat you. I mean, if they can stop the running game for the Browns, they'll win like they were winning when they were 11-0. Try to get your running game going. Jesus, at least try, right? Just give the first couple possessions, script out some plays to get your running backs yards, and try to keep the Browns on their toes. If not, the Browns defense is solid. They'll be able to stop these receivers potentially and win this game. Receivers need to catch the balls. They had a lot of trouble this year dropping passes in big moments, and it led to them losing some of those games after the 11-0 winning streak. And then Big Ben, this is my biggest key to the game, Jared. Big Ben needs to take every pain pill in the book before this game because that guy is falling apart. He can't even take a snap from under center. It's, whatever that guy's got to do to be the best Big Ben he can be at his age right now, do it. I don't care. Smoke weed, do whatever you got to do before the game. Big Ben's got to be there. But, I'm going to go, Jared, I'm actually going to go with the Steelers in this game. I think the Steelers win this game. I think they're getting a little bit better than they were the last few games. I don't care about yesterday's result. I don't know if that means anything that Mason Rudolph almost beat them. But I'm going to go with the Steelers. I just think the Browns, they finished the season on kind of a lower point, losing to the Jets, losing that game against the Ravens, and then almost losing to the Steelers. I'm going to go with the hotter team here, and the hotter team, unfortunately, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Right.
So I'll start with the Steelers here. And actually, before I even do that, the last time that these two teams matched up in the regular season, that was a meaningful game because obviously, like you mentioned yesterday, The Steelers rested a bunch of starters. It wasn't a true fair, starter on starter game. So we have to go back to, I believe it was in October, and Cleveland Browns traveled to Pittsburgh, just like what's going to happen next Sunday, right? Score was 38-7. Pittsburgh absolutely whooped him, and that was with Odell Beckham Jr. healthy on the Cleveland Browns, right? Still had their running game with Kareem Hunt. I'm sorry, Nick Chubb was out. He was injured at that point. Cleveland only rushed for 75 yards, and that's because they were down by so much that they had to throw the ball. Baker Mayfield ended up throwing 2 interceptions, only threw for 119 yards. So,
wow.
I mean, the last time Cleveland went to Pittsburgh, it wasn't pretty, right? And so we've got to think, yes, obviously Big Ben is completely banged up, not healthy. The Steelers don't have a running game. Their running game is essentially quick screens. Like, they literally throw a quick screen to Deontay Johnson or Chase Claypool and then let their playmakers, try to get yards. Like, that is an essential part of their running game. They don't actually hand it off. Like, James Conner is non-existent. James Conner's last 100-yard game was against the Browns in that 38-7 route. Since then, James Conner hasn't had a 100-yard game, right? So it's unbelievable to think that the Pittsburgh Steelers have just completely gone away from their running game. Here's what I will say about Cleveland. You're right. They've got one of the best running games in the league. You can argue Tennessee maybe is a little bit better, but a 1-2 punch of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, arguably the best duo in all of the NFL. They need to heavily rely on that. Like, each player, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, they both need like 20 carries. Cleveland needs to run the ball, and eat clock, right? That is, I think, their best recipe for success when it comes to beating their nemesis and their rival in the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just have this gut feeling, though, Nick. Baker Mayfield, Cleveland, Stefanski, the head coach.
Oh my God!
They're gonna want Baker to be the shining star, the spotlight. Cleveland hasn't been to the playoffs since 2008. All the talk about Baker Mayfield. Is he a bust? He shouldn't have been a top draft pick. This is by far his best year. All that stuff. I think they're gonna want to let Baker Mayfield take the reins and prove that he is an elite quarterback. Let's not forget, going into this offseason, regardless of what happens, Cleveland can start to negotiate with Baker Mayfield on a long-term extension. So this game is not only big for Cleveland and the city, it's big for Baker Mayfield. So I have this feeling that they're going to put the ball in Baker's hands, and they're not going to run it as much as they should because they're going to want Baker to prove that he is a legitimate quarterback and that he's not a bust. That's just the gut feeling I have. I don't think that's the right recipe for success and to win. Like I said, man, I think they're going to want to let Baker Mayfield be the reason why they win this game and not necessarily their two-headed monsters at running back.
So what are you saying? Because I thought you were going to say something else. So who wins this game? You're going.
Oh no. In saying all of that sounds great, right? And if you're awesome. A Cleveland staff member or a coaching staff, like, you want Baker to perform well, Pittsburgh Steelers is going to win this game. There's no doubt about that. I don't care how well Cleveland runs the ball or if Baker Mayfield is playing. The Pittsburgh Steelers will win this game. I'm just saying, like, if you're inside that Cleveland locker room, and if you're a coach, especially Stefanski, as much as he loves to run the ball, like I said, I think they want to highlight Baker. They want Baker to be
that makes sense.
That guy,
it makes sense,
right? Like, going into the playoffs, biggest spotlight in Cleveland Browns last decade. They want Baker to be the guy. Baker's had so much thrown at him, so much slack, so much negativity. He finally has a good year. I think they want to elevate his confidence and say, all right, we trust you, Baker. Yes, we have a good running game that we can lean on, but we want to put our trust completely in you. And what better way to do it than in a playoff game against your division rival in the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have completely dominated you for the last 2 or 3 decades, right? So I don't know, man. I have this feeling that they're going to put the ball in Baker's hands. It's not going to end up well. I'm just saying, I don't expect the crazy running game. I literally think they're gonna want to do a lot of play action and let Baker Mayfield decide whether the Cleveland Browns win or lose this game.
I'll say this to finish off this segment. I think this game is one of those weird games here where I think we're thinking of the Steelers, like the great defense and Big Ben. This is either going to be the Steelers win or the Browns blow them out. How I feel about this game, like the Browns are just going to come out and just kick their ass, and Big Ben's going to look awful, and they're not going to run the ball, and the defense is going to look as good, or the Steelers are going to be the Steelers we expect, and they're going to win. And I think they're going to be the Steelers we expect because it's playoff Steelers, it's playoff Big Ben. Like we've talked about with a lot of these other quarterbacks, that means something for Drew Brees and Tom Brady. For the Mitch Trubisky's, for the Jared Goffs, for the Phillip Rivers, it means something else. Or Russell Wilson, I'll throw in the good quarterback mention there too. So I'm going to go with Big Ben. I try to pick the best quarterbacks. When they're facing a quarterback that's a little bit questionable, I usually go with the quarterback. So I'm going to go with that. All right, guys, right now, we are going to be transitioning into our next segment. The RKJ Man, Mr. Ryan Johnson, is going to be coming up next. Just real quick, if you skipped forward and looked at some of our other analysis and maybe heard something about other things we said, hey, go back. You see it right here or right here on your screen. The ticker telling you what time each analysis of these playoff games was started at. So if you want to go back, check that out. If not, we're going to take a quick break real quick. It's going to be like 1 second, and then we're going to switch over, and you're going to see the insanity that is this next conversation. Justin Fields versus Trevor Lawrence and the national championship. All right, we are back here on the Cover 2 podcast, and we would like to introduce our special guest of the evening, Ryan RKJ Man Johnson. Welcome, Ryan.
Let's talk that talk, y'all. Hypocritical Nick. What's good, my brother? Boy, Jared Smith over there, the Tin Man himself has arrived, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, so that's what Ryan calls me. The RKJ Man calls me on our other podcast, Cheap Plug, The Ring Generals. That will be likely coming out a little bit later this week. And I don't know why you called Jared Tin Man though. What's that? What's the
Let me explain why I say that Jared Smith is the Tin Man. Okay, I feel like he has no emotion on this podcast except when he's talking about crappy subjects like the Dallas Cowboys, for instance, or any of these other things that he talks about. So that's why I call him the Tin Man. I feel like he has no emotion, or he has emotion when he's debating me. I get something out of him. I am the Rock to his Stone Cold Steve Austin. I am the Joker to his Batman.
Wow, it's coming out hard.
Listen, man. I can be calm, cool, and collected about any situation. I don't have to raise my voice or start hooting and hollering about stuff. I get my point across the way I do it, and obviously people respond. So, for some reason, you just don't tend to hear what I'm saying. So that's why I have to elevate myself. You got to turn the notch a couple times there.
Well, I'm not the one who was having issues before the podcast with their sound, by the way. And second of all, just letting you know that I can get my point across too. I'm just more entertaining.
Okay, well, so that's the RKJ Man. It's one of the reasons you're on this podcast today. What we will be talking about, as you heard earlier in the podcast, we will be talking about with Ryan the national championship game between Alabama and Ohio State. Should be a fun one. And the main reason RKJ Man is on the podcast today is because of a debate that we've been having on Twitter, Jared, RKJ Man, and I, about Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, who should be the number one pick. RKJ Man seems to think that Justin Fields really, really elevated his chances of the number one pick after that performance against Trevor Lawrence in Clemson. Jared and I agree otherwise and believe Trevor Lawrence should obviously still be the number one pick. We will get to that a little bit later. Let's start with the national championship game, guys. Alabama has been kicking ass all season, right? And they have Ohio State coming into town. Justin Fields coming off an amazing performance, which we'll likely talk about a little bit later. There's a chance Jalen Waddle comes back for this game, which would be a huge plus for Alabama. And, of course, Ohio State, is Justin Fields healthy? He had I believe it was the finger issue before, and now, obviously, he got his ribs shattered by that linebacker last game as well. And it's going to be looking like Drew Brees coming in this game. Jared, I'll let you get the first stab at this. Your first thoughts on Alabama and Ohio State.
Yeah, no, listen, Ohio State, in my opinion, deserves to be here. There was a lot of talk about because of their 5-game schedule, and the Big Ten not allowing them to come in. So, was Ohio State even deserving because of their lack of games, right? And obviously, they show after beating Clemson that they no doubt deserve to be here. It's just that you're running into the juggernaut of all juggernauts in Alabama that's clicking on all cylinders, and who also might get Jalen Waddle back, who was out since October because of an ankle injury, right? And everyone wants to talk about Devontae Smith, no doubt Heisman candidate, well-deserved, and is the favorite to win the Heisman. But let's not forget, Waddle is just as fast and probably even more shifty, right? So we know what Alabama has done without Waddle, and they're going to potentially get him back. Like, if I'm Ohio State secondary right now, I'm getting zero sleep, because how do you match up with Alabama? I don't care. You can take players from Clemson's team and Ohio State and like 5 of the other best college teams, put them all together, right? Take the best players, and you still might not be able to stop Alabama. Like, that is how good they are. So for me, you can't go against Alabama. I'm sorry. Ohio State is a good team. Regardless of Justin Fields and his injury and how healthy he is. Listen, this isn't that big of an argument for me or that big of a debate. It's Alabama and everybody else.
RKJ Man, now you've been super high on Justin Fields lately. It's the reason you're on this podcast. Explain to us how Fields can somehow beat this one of the best Alabama teams of all time.
So really quickly, Alabama's defense has struggled. Okay, in that Florida game, in the SEC championship game, they let Kyle Trask throw for over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. In one of the games against Ole Miss earlier this year, they had a guy named Matt Corral for Ole Miss. He threw for 365 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Nick Saban has had issues with that defense multiple times, and he said that that's a concern, and people have pointed that out. I think Alabama has gotten a little bit too focused on their offensive scheme and their offensive production. And I think the defense has struggled a little bit this year. And granted, I know they've had some good games the past couple of games, like LSU and whatnot, but some of these teams aren't as good as what they used to be in the SEC this year. Jared, give me a second to talk. Okay. Now, here's the thing about Justin Fields. Okay. Number one, he's a running quarterback. Alabama has had issues with running quarterbacks in the past. You look at Trevor Lawrence, who we'll talk about later, they had an issue with him. Deshaun Watson, they had an issue with them. So it's a situation where Justin Fields can get out on the edge and run. That's something that could be an advantage for Ohio State. Also, we can look at the running game. In the game against Northwestern, I know Justin Fields didn't have his best game, but they had Sermon run for over 300 yards. They have a prolific running game. And if you can run the football and keep that Alabama offense on the sidelines, that's a huge plus for Ohio State, and that can potentially help them win this game. Now, what I think is going to happen is I personally think Ohio State's winning this game. I think it's going to be a shootout at the end of the day, and I do think Justin Fields is going to have to dominate. And I believe this is all about Justin Fields at this point, trying to prove to people why he can be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft in a few months.
So I want to add a stat in here that RKJ Man. So you mentioned Matt Corral's passing performance. In that game, Alabama against Ole Miss also gave up 268 rushing yards. I had both those games tapered on my stats here too, RKJ Man, because I thought, it's odd that we're speaking about a team that's so good, and they gave up on an average of 47 points to these two teams. Florida, very solid and good. Ole Miss, not very much. Jared, what were you going to you raised your hand in the middle of RKJ Man's statement. What were you going to say?
I did. And then he just kept going. And there's so many things that I can reply to. Number one, Ryan, I do agree with you that Justin Fields will be going into this game, regardless of how healthy he is, looking to prove why he should be the number 1 pick. Like, that is just his kind of competitor mentality, and we've seen that. So I wouldn't expect anything less from Justin Fields, right? Hands down, no doubt. What I will say about Alabama's defense is you're right. This has not been the typical Nick Saban complete dominance, ranked number 1 in all of college football Alabama defense. I will tell you that they have 3 true freshmen that they have started, 2 in their secondary, and I believe they have 4 or 5 other true sophomores. So they are very young on defense. I'm not saying it's an excuse, but I'm saying that they are very young on defense, and I think they've had some learning curves to go throughout this season. And the fact that their offense has been so great, it's kind of been able to cover up for some of the mistakes that the defense has put forth. So, and the third thing, how Ryan, you mentioned that Justin Fields is a running quarterback. I want to correct you. I would say that he's a dual threat quarterback, right? A running quarterback to me, when you say that someone is a running quarterback, is that he can't throw. And I think Justin Fields proved in the game against Clemson that he can throw the ball all over the field. Because of his rib injury, I'm not so sure that they are going to be letting Justin Fields run on designed running plays. If a play breaks down and he has to get out of the pocket and run for a first down or to get yards, yes, I totally see that happening. But the typical designed runs or RPOs or whatever you want to call it that Ohio State typically does with Justin Fields, I think that will actually be scaled back because of the injury to his ribs. So I think that is an advantage for Alabama's defense right there.
So, Jared, I disagree with you on that. I think Fields has to use his legs to beat a team like Alabama. Ohio State has to use all of their weapons to beat a team like this. You can't if he's injured, I know you've said this on this podcast, if he's injured, it's different. Probably shouldn't be playing in the game. If he's hurt, he needs to suck it up and play. He's got a big body. Right. He just be smart. Slide. Don't do the things that got him hurt. But you still need to use his legs. That is very valuable. He's averaged in his career over 500 yards per year. If you average out the games that he was likely to play this season, they obviously played 7 games. Normally you'd play 12 or 13. So averaging out this year and last year, it's 500 yards per year on the in the run game, and he's only lost 1 game in his career. So I think he absolutely needs to use his legs. RKJ Man?
So, okay, I can agree with you, Jared, that he's a dual threat quarterback. But the ability to use your legs is super, super important in today's game, whether it's college or the pros, even in high school football. And these freshmen, they're going to see a lot of dual option plays. They're going to see a lot of play action. They're going to see a lot of mixed direction plays that they're not going to be able to handle and contain. And that's going to put them on the edge. And that's going to be a big plus for Ohio State. So I really think you need to look at that and consider that when you're talking about Justin Fields and Ohio State. And, we're giving credit to Alabama and their defense, but traditionally, Nick Saban has a hard time with running quarterbacks. I mean, can you remember Johnny Manziel way back in the day? He gave him fits. So it's a fact of the matter is this: when you get on the edge and when you can run the football, when you can do that play action pass against Nick Saban, especially against those freshman safeties or those freshman cornerbacks, it's going to be a huge advantage, I think, for Ohio State coming up this week in the national championship game.
So I'll say this. So, I have to agree with Ryan actually on this, Jared, because I do think if you limit Justin Fields, the way he can impact the game, all Alabama really has to do is stop Trey Sermon in the running game, and they have a good chance of winning. That receiving core with those Alabama DBs is not going to be as fierce as it normally is, and Fields won't be able to make the throws he did against Clemson, against Alabama, if the run game is stopped. And that's why you want the dual threat of Trey Sermon and Justin Fields. It's in my notes right here. It's almost like RKJ Man took a look at my notes before we started the show. And
he might have.
Picking them up. I'll throw a couple other interesting things, and I'll let you guys debate these too. So an interesting fact. So Ohio State, we're talking about the balanced attack. They're averaging on the year 272 yards passing and 272 yards rushing. Amazing balanced attack they have there. Alabama, here's the interesting fact about them. Yes, they're technically averaging like 20 more yards than Ohio State this year. They are averaging 350 yards passing and only 186 yards rushing. So they don't have as balanced of attack as a lot of people think. And that, I think, could come into play with this. And I'll let you guys take this over after I just say this. Ohio State has one guy on this defense I think needs to absolutely perform to the highest of his ability, and that's Shaun Wade. Shaun Wade is a projected late first-round corner, maybe second-round corner. He's the guy that needs to try and stop or limit Devontae Smith. You can't stop Devontae Smith in college.
Not going to happen.
But he needs to try. And that's one of my key players in this game is Shaun Wade, because if you can limit Devontae Smith, and by the way, if Jalen Waddle was playing, Alabama's winning. There's no I have no way of Ohio State to stop Alabama if Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith and Najee Harris and Mac Jones are playing. It's too tough. So I'm going to go at this assuming Jalen Waddle will not be able to play or will play a severely limited role in this game. If you can cover and limit Devontae Smith and focus on Najee Harris and the running game, which is not their strength, then you make Mac Jones beat you, which I think is the best case scenario. So that's at least my opinion of how Ohio State stops Alabama. What do you guys think about that? And do you think there's any chance that can happen?
Well, I know this. Ohio State has a top 5 defense in the Big Ten, and they have one of the top defenses in the nation. I mean, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it's going to be offense helping out the defense in this situation. I really do believe that running game for Ohio State's got to help out that defense. And like you said, Nick, that Shaun Wade guy, he did not have a good game when they played Clemson. I have to agree with you on this one, Jared. He did not have a very good game. So I expect him to take ownership of this against Devontae Smith and really, really be able to, contain him, put it on himself to contain him. And also, we're talking a lot about Waddle coming back, but let's be honest here, from a major injury like that where he was projected to be out for the rest of the season, he'll most likely be a decoy. So if he's most likely a decoy, you can focus on Devontae Smith. You can focus on stacking up the box on Najee Harris. Just make sure he doesn't jump over anybody, and you just got to make sure that you find a way to contain Mac Jones. And you're going to have to put a lot of pressure and blitzes on Mac Jones. I really like what they did against Trevor Lawrence, man. They had some very, very unique blitzes and some very, very unique schemes against Trevor Lawrence that really caught him off guard. If they can duplicate that, I think they can find a way to win this football game, or at least be close to the very end.
Jared, you didn't agree with me. You don't think Shaun Wade has any chance of stopping Devontae Smith?
No.
If he can do that, though, for example, do you think my strategy of making Mac Jones beat you and not Devontae Smith and Najee Harris is a little better of a scenario?
Yes, no, that is the strategy. And earlier, and I kind of brought up this comparison. It doesn't matter the sport. If you have like an all-star player, you have to be able to contain that player. And I said this, like if I'm a coach or if I'm a coaching staff, you say, we're not going to let that superstar player beat us, right? It's going to take the rest of the team, the other reserves, to beat us. Like you can live with the other players on the team beating you, but you can't live with a superstar that everyone knows about, the guy that might win the Heisman. You can't live with him beating you. So you have to stop him, right? So yes, what I will say about Shaun Wade is last year he was a slot corner, and that is basically where he kind of made his bread, kind of made a name for himself. He was able to play in the slot primarily because Jeff Okudah, who was a first-round draft pick of the Detroit Lions this year, was on the outside and was able to take away the other team's best receiver on the outside. This year, Shaun Wade, because there is no Jeff Okudah, has had to move to the outside, and I'm telling you, he's just not as comfortable. Especially in the game against Clemson, you saw him playing a lot of off coverage. Now, I'm not saying that he's not fast, but I think he was scared to get beat deep, which he still got beat deep, but like he doesn't come up and play press. He's not going to get physical with you, right? You have to get physical with Devontae Smith. He's not a big guy, right? Jalen Waddle is bigger than him. He's actually one of the more skinny receivers on Alabama. It's just he's so shifty and he's so quick out of his initial break that if you don't jam him initially, if you give him a 5 or a 7 yard cushion as a corner, good luck. And that is basically all that Shaun Wade has done all year long is he plays 5 to 7 yards off. He gives the receiver a free release off the line of scrimmage. So to me, unless they're going to change the technique in which Shaun Wade plays, this is a layup for Alabama and Devontae Smith. I'm giving him the ball. He's getting 15 to 20 targets if that's how the Ohio State defense is going to play is going to play Devontae Smith.
Yeah, no, it's a good point you bring up. I mean, he's going to play in the NFL as a slot corner. College, you can get away with being a normal corner. Is there that way that being a slot corner type, he can stop these guys? It'll be interesting to see. I think that guy is a key to this game and should have a chip on the shoulder with how pathetic he played against Clemson in a win, too. Like, it's that guy, the outlier guy that you're like, hey, man, we won by a lot, and you still played so bad that we almost came back. So, not really almost came back, but all right. So, the last thing I want to talk about with this game was the schedule difference. And that is, Alabama, they played 12 games. Ohio State played 7. Alabama, they played Georgia, Texas A&M, Auburn. They played Florida. Alabama's gone through the gamut. Ohio State, not so much, and they've struggled a bit against the good teams they played besides Clemson, which is a super interesting thing there. But against Northwestern, struggled. It might have been due to Justin Fields' hand injury that he had. But nonetheless struggled. 2 interceptions. And then 3 interceptions against Indiana when they were up 35-7 at one point. Those interceptions and those turnovers from Justin Fields were the reason Indiana had a chance at the end of that game. So what's your guys' take on this? Do you think the schedules matter, or do you think because of what Ohio State did to Clemson, it doesn't matter as much and it's kind of just a mano-a-mano game here? RKJ Man?
First of all, Ohio State has no control that the Big Ten were stupid idiots and they didn't have a schedule in place and a plan in place when this COVID-19 pandemic happened. So they were in limbo for the whole time. And from what I heard, Ohio State was possibly thinking about going to other conferences so they could actually play a season this year. So that's really not something that Ohio State can control. Now, in terms of the game against Northwestern is a top defense in the Big Ten. Indiana, another top defense in the Big Ten. Northwestern's number 1, Indiana's number 4. So there's no shame in struggling to those teams in terms of defense, and they still won. They still found a way to win that game. I mean, when it comes down to it, the fact that they went up against Clemson, a team who was a juggernaut, a team who a week ago had destroyed Notre Dame, who's gone through the gauntlet in the ACC, that to me proves that they are ready to compete with Alabama. They're much more ready to compete with Alabama than a Notre Dame was. So I think that the schedule difference has nothing to do with anything in this game. And I don't think we should be looking at that because at the end of the day, it's still 2 top conferences. It's 2 top programs. They have top recruits. They should be able to go on that field and compete.
Jed?
I hate doing this, but I actually agree with you. No, you actually bring up some great points, and the thing that I will piggyback off of is, to me, Ohio State is just rounding into midseason form. Like you mentioned, they've only played 5 regular season games. They had 2 cancellations in Maryland and Illinois. They probably would have beat the brakes off of both those teams anyway, but still, only having 5 games and then having their 6th game be the Big Ten championship, it's almost like you were getting into midseason form. You're kind of getting your legs underneath you. I know that the off-season programs were kind of cut short as well. So the conditioning and just, learning plays and all of that from a football standpoint, it takes teams a couple weeks to get by. That's why you see a lot of teams schedule cupcake games in the first week or 2 so that they can kind of give their players an opportunity to get familiar with the scheme and all that stuff. And I think that's exactly what we've seen from Ohio State. Even though they won all their games, they struggled a little bit during the season. And then at just the game against Clemson, we kind of saw them put it all together. So right now, I think Ohio State is playing some of the best football in all of college football other than Ohio State.
Speaking of which, you know who Alabama schedules on their schedule every single year besides this year and the COVID year? Western Carolina. Tennessee of Chattanooga. It's ridiculous. Okay, so I agree with them.
You know why they can do that, though? You know why they can do that? Because they play, let's see, a top 10 Texas A&M, top 10 Georgia, usually ranked Auburn, going into the year LSU, top ranked Florida. Oh, and then Notre Dame in the semifinal. I have to disagree with you guys 100%. Of course, the schedule makes a difference. Alabama has played these teams, and by the way, they've blown out a lot of these teams. Ohio State struggling against the 2 top 10 teams or the 2 top 20 teams they played. There absolutely makes a difference. Yes, they beat Clemson. They played one good game that they had a few weeks to get prepared for. I think there's absolutely a difference between Alabama playing all these tough teams in a 12-game span and Ohio State playing 7 games and struggling against every single team until they got a few weeks to get prepared for Clemson. They have 10 or 11 days to get prepared for Alabama, which I don't think is enough. And I guarantee the schedule will affect this game, and you'll see Alabama win this game. because they're used to beating these teams. I got to disagree with you guys on that. I don't know. Texas A&M, like Georgia, Florida, like they beat all these teams, and they blew out Georgia, and they blew out Texas A&M. Like, I don't know. I don't know how you guys could call each other college football analysts by saying that the schedule doesn't matter. Tell that to Cincinnati. Come on, tell it to Cincinnati. We're talking about, you know what I'm saying? Like Coastal Carolina. Tell it to Coastal Carolina that the schedule doesn't matter.
You really wanted to see Coastal Carolina in the college football playoff. You really wanted to see
Cincinnati, I could have dealt with. You saw how close Cincinnati got to beating Georgia.
And they lost, Nick.
Well, they lost, but you can lose. It would have been a better game than Notre Dame getting their ass whooped on national TV immediately.
You
like
really
we all
think
thought.
Cincinnati would have beat Notre Dame? Or you think Cincinnati would have come in there and be competitive?
No, I don't think anybody's going to beat Alabama this year. That's what I was trying to say. I don't think anybody's going to beat Alabama, but I think Cincinnati, based on that schedule, would have got in and done a better job than Notre Dame did, because at least their scheme was a little was something that could have given Alabama fits. Like you said, RKJ Man, Cincinnati's quarterback Riddler, running quarterback, dual threat. It would have been a little more difficult than Notre Dame going into that game. But let's switch topic, guys. So is everyone okay? Go ahead. Sorry.
I just need to bring up one thing real quick. Okay. So you mentioned that terrible schedule that Alabama has to play every year, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned the fact that Ohio State only has had to play about half of those games, right? Or 6 or 7 games, right? You know what that means? Ohio State is fresher, because the SEC is one of the most grueling conferences to go through every single year. It is the closest you can get to the National Football League in college, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people agree with that. So if Ohio State is coming into this game with only 6 or 7 games, and they've had multiple games off because of COVID-related issues that hasn't been their fault, it's a situation where they're going to be fresher than Alabama. There's going to be a lot less wear and tear on their bodies, so they're going to be able to go the distance in that fourth quarter compared to Alabama, who's had to feel the effects of a Florida or a Texas A&M or an Arkansas or an LSU. So that's what I think is going to play a major difference too in this game as well.
Jalen Waddle hasn't had to feel that effect. He's coming back and he's missed most of the season.
Yeah, but Jalen Waddle's coming off a major injury. Who knows how he's going to be coming off a major injury? You lose some speed.
Very, very interesting stuff, guys. Great analysis on the national championship game. So now the analysis might go out the door with this next segment, because this is where we argue, and this is why we're on this podcast today, talking about this stuff. So we just said a lot about Justin Fields, but we want to turn the attention to Trevor Lawrence versus Justin Fields now, and not Justin Fields versus Alabama. RKJ Man, you think Justin Fields' performance was so amazing that you even picked Ohio State to beat Alabama in the national championship. Jared and I, and especially myself, think Trevor Lawrence is absolutely the number one pick, and the Jacksonville Jaguars would be stupid as hell not to beat this or not to pick Trevor Lawrence number one. But Jared, I'm not the one that's going to be debating RKJ Man today. I'll input some stats if anybody gets a little blasphemous on this show and starts making things up.
You're basically saying me. You're basically saying.
I've never known Jared to make up stats on the podcast, so I'll just let the viewers know for themselves. But Jared, I'll let you start because you are my podcast mate on the Cover 2 podcast, so I will let you start first. Tell me why or who should be the number one pick in the NFL draft. Or if the Alabama-Ohio State games mean something different.
Listen, I think the only thing that the Ohio State-Clemson game did was elevate Justin Fields' status. I don't think that Trevor Lawrence dropped one bit. We've seen 3 complete years of Trevor Lawrence. Unfortunately, he had to miss 2 games this year because of COVID, right? Not even because of injury. The guy he's so far been able to stay on the field, and availability is the best ability, right? We've heard that multiple times. So I don't care how great you are. If you can't get on the field, then you're no good to a team. So right there, we've heard multiple scouts, college scouts, NFL scouts, people that know more or have forgotten more football than the 3 of us will ever know in our entire lifetimes, that say that Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback prospect to come out of college since Andrew Luck. And we know how good Andrew Luck was, right? Obviously, he wasn't able to win a championship. We can talk about that in the Indianapolis Colts another time. But just Andrew Luck and his ability and his upside, people are saying that Trevor Lawrence is the best thing since that, right? So I'm just going by what the experts are saying, along with what my own 2 eyes have seen. How can we go against that? Trevor Lawrence, freshman year, goes up against Alabama in the national championship, wins as a true freshman, finishes the year with 30 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, comes back his sophomore year, improves in the touchdown ratio, 36, throws 8 more picks, but he also had more attempts. So, and then he comes back this year with a 24-5 touchdown to interception ratio. And obviously, like I mentioned, that's because he missed 2 games. So to me, he has the complete body of work. He's played 3 full seasons, 1 more season than Justin Fields has. And he's won a national championship and been in another national championship where he lost last year, right? But he's gotten his team to the college football playoffs all 3 years as no doubt the best team in the ACC. You can talk about all the stats, and all the other things you want with Justin Fields. When you look at the tape and you see Trevor Lawrence, like, it doesn't take a genius to see how good this kid is and what his trajectory and his upside is going to be.
Now, RKJ Man, why is Justin Fields better than those immaculate things that Jared just said about Trevor Lawrence? How could you possibly think that Justin Fields is above that? What possibly has he done to make it better, to be better, to be the number 1 pick?
First of all, Jared, I'm really disappointed. I thought you would come out with a better argument than that. That was pretty bad. All right, so
pretty bad. What do you need? What do you mean? How's that bad?
Those are stats.
I'll tell you why it's pretty bad. I gave you your time to talk. Let me talk. Okay. So let's go with the most recent stats. When he played Clemson this past week, he had a 78.6% completion percentage. He had 6 touchdowns compared to 1 interception. Yes, I know he had that 1 bad pick. And in a year ravaged by COVID, he was 73.4% completion ratio on his passes, and he threw 21 touchdowns compared to 6 interceptions. And that's better than Trevor Lawrence in terms of his completion percentage, by the way. Here's what I didn't like from Trevor Lawrence. Here's what I'm going to start off with this, okay? He had 5 fumbles this year. He lost a fumble in this game. For the season, he had 3 fumbles. You cannot make those types of mistakes in the National Football League. And when he's going up against people like DeForest Buckner and other players in that division, he's going to have a hard time if he's carrying the football like a loaf of bread in a situation like that against these defensive players in that division. Also, here's my other issue. A lot of people have made the argument that because Trevor Lawrence's defense sucked, or because he had a situation where Etienne or any of his other wide receivers weren't stepping up to the plate in the game against Ohio State, he struggled. Well, the fact of the matter is this: when you're the number 1 pick, you're not going to go to a great team all the time. He's most likely going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Would you like to know where they ranked in total defense, since we're talking about defense? They ranked near the bottom. They ranked 31st. They were 27th in passing yards. They were 31st in points. These are all defensive stats. Bottom half in like the red zone. So he's not going to go to a division. He's not going to go to a team where everything is just going to be laid out for him like a buffet. This isn't Golden Corral, okay? He's not going to be served whatever he wants to. It's going to be a situation where he's going to have some pains. He's going to have some growing pains, and he's going to struggle in the National Football League. That's just the way it is. I'm seeing multiple things with him. Also, the ACC compared to the Big Ten, I'm going to be quite frank with you. We know this. I know this, being from North Carolina, that is a basketball conference, okay? You have multiple defenses. So in the ACC, they have 3 defenses in the top 50. You've got Clemson, Notre Dame, and Pittsburgh. In the Big Ten, you had 4. You have Wisconsin, who's the number 1 in the Big Ten in the nation. You have Penn State. You had Ohio State. You have Indiana. That's 4 teams that Justin Fields has had to go through in his career, and he's beaten all of those teams. So that's very, very impressive in itself. Whereas Trevor Lawrence has had basically a cupcake schedule, and I know Notre Dame's been in there, but we all know Notre Dame is nowhere near the powerhouse that it used to be. So with that being said, I just don't see it that Trevor Lawrence is going to come in the NFL and dominate. A lot of people are giving him a lot of credit, and they're saying, oh, he's the next big thing. Well, I'm just saying this. You should give a better look to Justin Fields and actually give him a little bit more consideration if you're Jacksonville because of the way he played. Yes, I know he had 3 interceptions against Indiana. Yes, I know he had 2 interceptions against Northwestern, but he still won. He was able to find a way to get his team to run, to be able to win that game. He was able to say, look, my passing's not working, but I can run this football with Sermon. He's over 300 yards. That is the advantage that Justin Fields has, and I think he's going to show even further why he should be considered for the top pick this week against Alabama.
Okay, so you mentioned, RKJ, that these fumble issues for Trevor Lawrence and how these interceptions didn't matter for Justin Fields because they won against Northwestern, who, you know, is obviously, Jared, an offensive juggernaut in this league, right? And then Indiana, 3 interceptions, almost brought, yes, Indiana, who's the basketball team? You know, the real good basketball school.
Indiana was a good team this year.
They were good. They were a good team, but they shouldn't be beating Ohio State. I'm just saying that
Ohio State.
But that's only because we wouldn't even be talking about that game because of how bad the blowout would have been if Justin Fields wouldn't have thrown those interceptions. But you're right, they won. They won those games. But you know what game Justin Fields didn't win that he threw 2 huge interceptions in? Oh. You know who the other quarterback was in that game? That was Trevor Lawrence in 2019 in the semifinal. Justin Fields lost them that game. Now, you can say he improved, he had 1 year later, but that was one of his biggest games of his career, maybe the biggest besides this national championship, and he threw 2 key interceptions while Trevor Lawrence came back from being hurt in that game and came all the way back and won. So I'm just saying, also I want to say this one thing too. The 2 fumbles that Lawrence has had in his 2 losses were both in garbage time. They didn't really matter as much as people think. You look at the stat, but you look when it happened, Clemson's down by 3 touchdowns, or they're on their last drive of the game when stuff is kind of crazy. And against LSU, he did it when they were down by 17 on the last drive of the game. One of his interceptions, or his only interception against Ohio State, came in the last drive of the game as well. So even in these big games that he's lost, his only 2 losses, his turnovers have not been in big moments of the game. They've been kind of in garbage time, and he's played relatively well in those 2 games. RKJ?
So you talked to me about last year, Justin Fields struggling. Well, he made up for that last week, throwing 6 touchdowns and interceptions. You talked to me about Trevor Lawrence being injured and going out and throwing 2 touchdowns last year. Well, guess what? Justin Fields got injured, had to go in a tent, came back and threw for 4 more touchdowns. So it's matched for me personally. So he ticked for tot. They both won against each other. So that's just the fact of the matter. I mean, we're talking about this. Now, I don't think that Trevor Lawrence is a bad quarterback. He's a great quarterback. Do I think he's going to be possibly a good prospect in the NFL? Yes. But I just want us to hold off on our brakes here on this whole situation. I want to hold off on our brakes here with this whole situation of Trevor Lawrence automatically going number 1 and Justin Fields being all the way down at the bottom at number 2. That's not fair. That's not fair. After what Justin Fields did, that's what these experts have said. They said that the
here comes the blasphemy.
Number 1 and number 2 is so far down it's not even funny. Like, I'm just saying Jacksonville needs to give more of a look at Justin Fields.
That's not what you're saying. You just said Trevor Lawrence is even a good prospect. See, this is why you're on here today, RKJ. You can't say stuff like that. That's crazy.
I never said that.
Yes, you did. You just said that.
I never said that. I said Trevor Lawrence, if he makes the mistakes that he makes, will struggle in the NFL.
Okay, so let me talk about mistakes. Well, actually, Jared, go ahead. Jared, I gotta give to. I've taken too much time already, so go ahead, Jared.
Let me jump in here. First of all, going from the number 1 pick to the number 2 pick is not all the way down here. It's 1 spot. First of all, okay. Second of all, so you want to talk about Trevor Lawrence. You want to talk about Trevor Lawrence and potentially going to the Jaguars with the number 1 overall pick. You're right. The Jaguars obviously have the first pick for a reason. The projections are that Justin Fields is going to go number 2 overall. Is he going to a good team? Are the New York Jets like a good team? Right? So you made this argument that Trevor Lawrence is going to go to Jacksonville and he's not going to have the pieces around him, and it's it's going to be a lot different year. He's not going to have the type of success. Do you think that if Justin Fields went to the Jaguars at number 1 in some type of upset, or if he goes number 2, like, you think Justin Fields is going to have that much more of an impact than Trevor Lawrence would, like on a bad team? I think both of these players are going into bad situations, and it's going to take more than a couple years to build a team around them and be able to compete and actually contend, right? Because that's what these guys play for, is contending. So we saw Joe Burrow, and I'm not trying to compare Joe Burrow to Trevor Lawrence as far as talent-wise, because I think Trevor Lawrence is the better quarterback. But we saw Joe Burrow come out as the number 1 overall pick. And from a stat standpoint, and just from what we saw from him, he showed signs of being a legitimate, all-star quarterback for the future. But he still struggled. Why? Because his team was bad around him. So in my opinion, your argument about, Trevor Lawrence going to Jacksonville, that's going to basically kind of dilute his stats and his status. I can make the same argument for Justin Fields, whether Justin Fields goes to Jacksonville or Justin Fields goes to the Jets with the number 2 overall pick. Both of these players, their stats are about to diminish tremendously, not because of their talent alone, but because of the teams that they're going to. So I think that particular argument that you made, Ryan, is invalid to me, because you pick in the top 5, top 10 of the draft for a reason. It's because you suck. You're not going to a good team. It's going to take time.
Well, I mean, the draft is because you suck. We all know that. But I just think at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, Justin Fields will be a better situation. He'll be able to come into a crappy situation, and he'll be able to lead a team and get that team going back again, being able to win football games better than Trevor Lawrence. If you look at Trevor Lawrence, I feel like everything has been laid out for him. A crappy ACC. He's had the best wide receivers. He's always been at the top of his division. He's always gotten these accolades. It's not going to be the same when he goes into Jacksonville and he has to look up at Indianapolis, and he also has to look up at the Tennessee Titans, and also the Houston Texans might be very good next year if they can get the right coach and some right pieces around them. So, I mean, that's going to be a tough division for him to succeed in a few years, regardless of how he plays, just because you're going to have a hard time getting talent in Jacksonville. And you go to the New York Jets. Yes, I know the New York Jets suck, but all they got to do is find the right coach. They got to find the right general manager.
Wait a minute.
If they stick to a plan and they have a plan that makes sense, guess what? All you got to do is look up at Buffalo. And if you get the right players and you draft well for the next few years, Justin Fields can be a top-tier quarterback.
Jerry, I got this. This was blasphemy. Jared, I want to have Jared answer this question. Jared, who has better defenses out of these 3 teams? Would it be the Texans, Titans, and Colts, or the Bills, Dolphins, and Bill Belichick, essentially? Wouldn't you say it's a little tougher with the New York Jets and Justin Fields playing those defenses rather than the AFC South? I'm going to take the Dolphins and Bills over any of those teams that you mentioned.
You'd think so.
Yeah. How about we come back when the Bills smoke that Colts defense on Saturday? We'll come back and see how good that Indianapolis defense is and how much Trevor Lawrence will be able to cut through them.
I forgot. Didn't the Jets beat the LA Rams this year? Didn't they beat the LA Rams in Los Angeles this year with that defense? They got multiple interceptions on Jared Goff, if I don't remember.
That's a good point. You're right. And they also beat Cleveland.
So that's a defense that could possibly do better if you have the right coaching, the right general manager with a plan, and you draft right. And one of those things is to draft Justin Fields because it just helps the overall building. So yes, the Jets could possibly be a contender within the 5 to 6 years.
Come on.
And they do something correct.
That's going to be in the video. The Jets are going to be a contender in 5 to 6 years. Okay.
Listen.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No. I want to make a quick argument about Jacksonville, right? And if we're going to compare these 2 teams and who's going to have the better trajectory, I will say this about Jacksonville. They've got 2 first-round picks this year, obviously the number 1 overall pick, and then their second first-round pick comes from the Rams after that Jalen Ramsey trade. They also have 2 number 2 picks. They also, if I'm not mistaken, have the most salary cap to use this offseason at close to, if not $100 million. They're also in Florida where there's no state income tax. So you bring a new head coach, a new general manager, the more than likely possibility of Trevor Lawrence, right? And you're going to tell me that you're not going to be able to lure players there with no state income tax, the potential ability to play with Trevor Lawrence, who is the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck and many people's opinions, right? I mean, yes, the Jaguars are going to need time. It's going to take a couple years. But with all those draft picks and all that money and potentially Trevor Lawrence coming in, I think that is a better situation, whether you're a coach or a player, to go to than to the New York Jets. Yes, the Jets are going to need a new head coach as well. They already have a general manager, but the Jets don't have as much money to spend in free agency. They don't have the number of draft picks that the Jaguars do. And the Jets are literally just the dumpster fire. Right? I mean, yes, we know Jacksonville hasn't been much better, but I'm sorry, in my opinion, I would rather go to Jacksonville, Florida, Sunshine State than New York and get snowed on and still suck. Just my my opinion.
Really quickly, where did all those draft picks in previous years for the Jacksonville Jaguars go? They're on other teams.
You're right.
They're on other teams.
Like I just said, they're bringing a new coach and a new GM. So they're going to have a whole different draft strategy. I'm not saying it's going to work completely, but they're going to have a fresh mindset in there. The old regime is gone. So you're right. Those players that were formerly picked as high draft picks, they're not there anymore. But guess what? Neither are the coaches or the general managers that were picking those players. It's a whole new regime.
You talk about how Jacksonville is an attractive destination for free agents, but they've never really gotten major free agents.
I said more attractive than the Jets. I didn't say it was like the attractive destination. I said more attractive than the Jets.
If that's the case, they would have gotten major free agents last season, Jared. They didn't get anybody last year.
Well,
so I'm sorry, what?
Major free agents don't go to teams that suck. They suck last year, too.
Well, Jacksonville's going to suck. Jacksonville sucks this year. You think they're going to go? You think a major free agent's going to go this year?
What I'm saying is, like, compare it to the Chargers or something like that. Both these teams were projected to be two of the worst teams in the league, Jets and Jags, before the season. All right, so I want to just lay a couple stats in here before I let you guys kind of do your closing arguments. So these guys, on average, and again, for Justin Fields, I inflated them. I doubled them, essentially, from what he has now because he played less games this season, what he would have did against Maryland and all these other terrible, Big Ten teams, Michigan, all these schools that he would have probably beat. So just know that these stats are sort of out of in the air, for example, but this is what he was projected to do if he was playing a full season. So I'll start with Lawrence, though. Lawrence, he averaged in his 3-year career at Clemson 3,300 average passing yards and just over 300 average rushing yards per season, 108 total touchdowns on his career. That's final because his season is done, and only 17 total interceptions in 3 years. So he's only averaging about 6 interceptions in about 13, 14 games every single year. That's pretty amazing right there. Now, the fumbles you mentioned, I, for some reason, can't find any fumble stats on the internet, so I apologize for not having the fumble. But you mentioned Trevor Lawrence had 5 fumbles this year. That's noted. I don't know how many Fields has, so I won't be saying that here. But so for Justin Fields, on average for 2 years, same thing, 3,300 pass yards. So they're even in that moment right there. 500 rush yards per year. That actually could have been higher based on how he was doing this year, rushing the ball. Here's the big difference between the two, is 9 interceptions in 2 years in only 21 games for Justin Fields. I didn't inflate that stat. That's what he actually did in essentially a year and a half as quarterback at Ohio State. So if you look at the projection, he would have played 3 years at Ohio State. He would have had way more interceptions than Trevor Lawrence is 17. He probably
touchdowns again, Nick, for Justin Fields.
Touchdowns. Let's see. I believe it was. Oh, it's the touchdowns is well over the combined. It's over Trevor Lawrence. I wasn't able to get an exact number, but it's over 108. I apologize for not saying that one. But as far as the interceptions go, there was the potential, if I average it up, that Fields had more interceptions than Lawrence did in his whole career this year. So I'm just saying, there's where the big discrepancy comes in. But I'll let you guys do your closing arguments. You don't need to really respond to that. Just do your closing arguments on why Justin Fields should be number one, and Jared, why Trevor Lawrence should obviously be number one.
Go ahead, Ron. Go ahead.
I mean, I've already said mostly what I said, but I mean, the fact of the matter remains is that Justin Fields played a phenomenal game against Clemson, and you're only as good as your last game. And from what I saw from Trevor Lawrence, I saw some major issues that will need to be addressed in the NFL. And going up in that tough division in the AFC South with two really good teams in Tennessee and the Indianapolis Colts and Houston on the rise too, he's going to have some issues. You're going to have some major cultural issues in Jacksonville. It's a whole new building. It's a whole new team. They're talking about getting Urban Meyer, a coach who has no NFL experience. He's reaching out to NFL contacts as we speak. What NFL context does he have? You have Shad Khan, who says he wants to get more involved in the GM and the personnel decisions. And we kind of know how GM and personnel decisions go. Jared Smith, your Dallas Cowboys, with Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson. So we all know how these things work out. I just think that Trevor Lawrence has had everything prepared, everything laid out on a plate for him, and he's been able to eat from the finest of foods, whereas Justin Fields has had to be scrappy. He's had to go to Walmart. He's had to go to all these crappy grocery stores and go ahead and get
Ohio State
and make the best type of food he could possibly make, and he's done it. And I think Justin Fields should get a better look at number one just because of how he played. The toughness factor. That's something we don't see very often. You saw it last year with Trevor Lawrence. Well, Justin Fields came back and threw for 6 touchdowns after he got his rib caved in. So I just think it's a fact of the matter that when you have to look at it and you say who's the more ready quarterback, I think Justin Fields, when he goes to the NFL, because of his dual threat option, because he's more accurate. A lot of people are told to saying, okay, well, what about Dwayne Haskins and how accurate he was? Different situation, different quarterback. I believe Justin Fields has a little bit more accuracy than Dwayne Haskins to him. So, and he throws a better football than Dwayne Haskins too.
Yeah, better attitude too.
Yeah, he doesn't go to strip clubs. So it's the fact of the matter is I think Justin Fields should get a better look at number one, and I think the Jets have got a good quarterback at number two for sure.
I shouldn't even say anything because what you just said just played into my argument. So I should just shut up and we should just end this show right now. But I won't. I'll come back with a couple things. You want to mention how Justin Fields is a dual threat quarterback, and I said that as well. I totally agree with you. But, that doesn't mean that Trevor Lawrence isn't. In 2019, last year, Trevor Lawrence ran for 563 yards in that one season, along with 9 touchdowns. To me, that is a dual threat quarterback in itself. This year, he only had 203. What?
I'm sorry. You think Trevor Lawrence is going to do that against the number one defense in the Indianapolis Colts? Do you think Trevor Lawrence is going to do that next year?
When he has to get away and scramble, I'm not talking about designed runs, but if the play breaks down, yes. Do I expect Trevor Lawrence to be able to get out of the pocket and move? No doubt. He's not stationary. We're not talking about Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. This guy, when he needs to, he can get out of the pocket.
Completely different beast. It's a completely different beast with these cornerbacks.
RKJ, did you not see him run the ball in that Ohio State game for a touchdown, get around the edge? He has a running ability.
I get the obvious. Guess the NFL is a different beast. Duh. We understand that. What I'm saying is I just gave you numbers that back up what I'm saying, that Trevor Lawrence can run the ball if necessary. They're not going to do designed runs. He's not Cam Newton, okay? He's not Lamar Jackson. I understand that. But if the play breaks down, yes, he's not going to sit in the pocket like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning and just take a sack. The guy can use his legs to get out of the pocket. That's what I'm saying. And for some reason, I don't know. I'm like, am I speaking Spanish? Am I speaking Portuguese or something? I'm pretty sure I'm articulating very clearly what I'm saying to you, Ryan. Do you get it?
Yeah, I get it. And you do get the fact that if he runs outside of the pocket in the NFL and does that again, he's going to get rocked.
And Justin Fields won't. Justin Fields is so much more athletic and such a better runner that he's just going to be able to elude all of those defenders.
He didn't last week.
He's a shifty small guy, man. He's a shifty small guy.
He didn't last week.
He knows how to take.
He might have broke a couple of ribs last week.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, Justin Fields didn't elude anyone last week. Justin Fields got his ribs knocked out last week.
That happens.
That's what you said. That
okay. All right. Now, the last thing I want to say before I give it over to you, Nick, is Ryan, you've said on this show a couple times, you've said it on Twitter a lot, you're only as good as your last game. Okay, well, if you're only as good as your last game, right? Trey Sermon, the running back for Ohio State, one of the reasons why Justin Fields was able to throw for 6 touchdowns and 385 yards was because Clemson had to basically put more men in the box to stop Trey Sermon, who ran 31 times for 193 yards. So Trey Sermon, if we want to just say you're only as good as your last game, Trey Sermon should be a first-round pick, right? Because you're only as good as your last game.
Number one pick.
No, I mean,
I never said number one pick, but he should be a first-round pick if you're doing things like that. Yeah, I mean, like, and why are you bringing Trey Sermon in this? We're talking about versus
hold on.
I am saying it is one game. So if we're going to go off of your last game, that is Trey Sermon's last game. 31 carries, 193 yards, and a touchdown. He should be a first-round pick.
Jared,
he should be a first-round pick. Thank you, Jared. Thank you.
You guys are
burying Trey Sermon's. You just helped Trey Sermon's draft stock.
You guys are burying the lead on this Trey Sermon stuff. Trey Sermon running for like 600 yards in 2 games is one of the reasons Justin Fields has had such a good season.
That's what I just said.
Travis Etienne has not played well in some of these big games for Lawrence, and it's one of the reasons Clemson didn't look good against Notre Dame the first time and didn't look good against Ohio State. So I'm just saying, running backs have a lot to do with it. Check our Twitter.
You want to talk about Etienne? 2018, Trevor Lawrence freshman year, Etienne ran for 1,600 yards and 24 total touchdowns. Last year, he ran for just over 1,600 yards and 19 touchdowns. This year, he was at 914 yards. So I'm pretty sure Etienne also had something to do with Trevor Lawrence being able to have protection and being able to throw the ball wherever he wanted, because defenses had to stack the box and give one-on-one matchups to the outside.
Very good last point there. I'll stop it there. Real quick, we're going to end this podcast, but I wanted to mention 2 news stories that we obviously, you guys can tell, this one's recorded during the day. The NFL segment was recorded last night. 2 news elements I wanted to mention before we get off this podcast. Number one, there is definitely dissension between the Eagles and their coaching staff and their team. Players coming out saying that they did not expect that to happen. A couple of players had to be held back from Doug Peterson making that decision because those players wanted to beat Washington. They wanted to beat Washington. So dissension, and maybe my prediction of both guys being gone, Jared might be right. RKJ Man, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I predicted that Carson Wentz or Doug Peterson 100% after this year would be gone, and it might be both. It's crazy. Last thing I wanted to mention too, Kevin Stefanski, the head coach of the Browns, is out for the Steelers game in the playoffs Sunday night because of COVID-related issues. I don't know why the hell these teams aren't in a hotel right now already quarantining themselves.
Why are we not doing a bubble?
Well, at least not even a bubble, but like do it like baseball did and have everybody bubble each game. Like it's ridiculous. But so I wanted to lay those 2 news elements out because obviously that was not talked about on the first segment. So I wanted to mention those 2 things. All right, again, if you just want to see the college football segment or you just want to see RKJ and you're interested in Jared and I's NFL analysis of every single playoff game this weekend, go back in the little ticker in the middle. You'll see the times of when all those started, so you can go back and check that out. But for this podcast, we are done. RKJ Man, Ryan Johnson, thank you again for being on the podcast today. You brought energy. You brought what I expected being your other
Thank you for coming on. Always making Nick and I look better, so we appreciate you.
No. That's not how it works, bro.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Leave a comment. Let us know who you think is number 1 pick. Let us know who won the debate between Jared and RKJ Man. But for the Cover 2 podcast, we are finished. Once again, I am Nick Nenad.
And I'm Jared Smith.
And we will see you guys next week talking about the playoffs and the result of the national championship. See you guys.